Tania.
Well, namaste to everybody. Actually, I'm always overwhelmed with the beauty and wisdom of Harold's musics. And also having started the morning with Michael's brilliant words, actually I feel, very emotionally touched, because we are switching here to the other side of the world and try to understand the Four Noble Truths or get a hint of it. But before following this stream of music, I would like to invite Tuya and the ceremonial group. So we're going to get into another vibration, the Sanskrit vibration with words. And I would like to teach all of you a very famous mantra called Gate Gate, which is the essential mantra of a very famous sutra called the Heart of Wisdom, and has to do with the understanding, meditating, and final absorption of the concepts of ultimate emptiness. So this mantra is very simple to sing. And when we sing, like Carol said, we are moving the whole world. This vibration is going all over. So this is a time, actually, specific time for us to serve. So the mantra goes like this: Gate, Gate. Gate means away, away. Para Gate, long, long way. Para Sangate, way, way beyond. Bodhi Swaha. Then we will be able to understand the ultimate wisdom of emptiness. So we are going to sing with this beautiful choir right here. Would you please come to the front here and sing with me? And we are going to start with a video. Well, y'all did a beautiful job for being the first time. but after Harold instructions, this is really fantastic. Okay, so my topic today, it's a great challenge to speak about the Four Noble Truths. And the mantra is already a sort of subliminal way of saying that it takes many lifetimes for us to really understand this sutra, which was the first sutra presented by the Buddha once he got enlightened. Well, most of you know about who was Buddha Shakyamuni. Just there are a few couple of things. The historical Buddha was born in 563 BCE as a prince in the family of the Shakyas, in a small kingdom in the Himalayas where we find Nepal today. He was married to Yashodhara and had one son, Rahula. The family name was Gautama, but he became known as Buddha Shakyamuni, which means the silent sage of the Shakyas. He lived most of his life as a wandering ascetic. This name was given in order to distinguish him from the historical transcendent Dhyani Buddhas, such as Amitabha, Akshobhya, Vairocana, Ratnasambhava, Mogasiddhi, and Vajrasattva. They are teachers of the Bodhisattvas and are considered supramundane or completely perfect Buddhas. Each has a specific Pure Land. Well, what is the Buddha principle? The Buddha principle actually is something that is innate in us, just like the Christ nature. It manifests itself, however, in various forms, depending on the vehicle being utilized. So this information that I'm going to previously give to you, it's actually an approach done by the Dalai Lama in one of his speeches in the West for Westerners, because it's not something that can be leveled up. You are going to understand the sutra according to the vehicle that you are having in this incarnation or at the present moment. So the small vehicle, which other people concentrate on the personality, is called Hinayana. Then we have the Mahayana, the great vehicle, when you already have developed the altruistic mind. And finally, the third is the Vajrayana, or the secret vehicle, where you do learn and practice Tantra. The Mahayanas believe in the existence of only one Buddha in every age, while the Mahayanas feel there are countless Buddhas. The transcendent Buddhas, which I mentioned before, are all embodiments of the Buddha principle. It's important to mention that Buddha is not a personal name, but an adjective which indicates someone who has achieved enlightenment. In Sanskrit, Bodhi, and in the song we just sang, Bodhi Swaha, which is a goal of the Buddhist path. It means awakened to the true nature of things as taught in the Four Noble Truths. Jack Kornfield, in his introduction to Buddha, relates a very well-known story on what Shakyamuni said about himself. It is said that soon after his enlightenment, the Buddha passed a man on the road who was struck by the Buddha's extraordinary radiance and peaceful presence. The man stopped and asked, "My friend, who are you? Are you a celestial being or a god?" "No," said the Buddha. "Well then, are you some kind of magician or wizard?" Again, the Buddha answered, "No." "Are you a man?" "No." "Well, my friend, then who are you?" The Buddha replied, "I am awake." Thus, Buddha means one who is awake, and the teachings of Buddhism express the noble path taught by Shakyamuni to lead all beings to awakening. The most important function of the Buddha is to act as a teacher, leading disciples into enlightenment through exposition of the Dharma. There are, however, some who are known as Pratyeka Buddhas, who attain enlightenment but do not teach. Others are known as Arhats, due to the fact that they discover the truth, the Dharma, by themselves, through direct experiences, rather than hearing. All schools of Buddhism today believe that just as we had many Buddhas in the past, there will be many in the future. The one manifesting in our present age is Lord Maitreya, associated with the Christ in the West. And Maitreya, at the time of the Buddha, was a bodhisattva, manifesting as a bodhisattva. There are lineages of classical Buddhism in Tibet, which I thought would be interesting for us to review here. There are two moments of propagation of the Dharma. The first propagation happened in the 8th century in Tibet, with the Nyingma school, whose founder was Padmasambhava, which means lotus-born, a very famous tantric yogin. This first Tibetan school was based at Samye Monastic Center, and it became known as the School of the Ancients. The characteristic Nyingma teachings focus on Dzogchen, or great perfection, its supreme doctrine. Dzogchen holds the original mind to be the basis of consciousness. Here we have a photo of His Holiness the Fourth Katok Gyatso Rinpoche in the company of Dalai Lama. Katok was born in 1954 and was appointed during 29th Nyingma Monlam in Bodh Gaya Festival in January of this year. Secondly, we have the Gelugpa lineage, which is the largest of the four main orders, to which the Dalai Lamas belong. It was founded by Jetsun Kappa in the 14th century and remained as the most influential lineage down to modern times. It integrates the methodical study and practice of both the sutras and the tantras. It utilizes synthesis, but was based upon the old Kadampa lineage derived from the teachings of the great master Atisha in the 11th century. In addition to the monastic code known as Vinaya, the monks are known as yellow hats, used during their ceremonials, as opposed to the red hats of other schools. Presently, the head is the Venerable 14th Dalai Lama, His Holiness Tenzin Gyatso, who lives in Dharamsala, India. And here we have a tanka of Jetsun Kappa, and you see him with yellow head. And he's part of the second propagation in schools because he united the sutras and the tantras. So it's important to notice the yellow hat of Jetsun Kappa, because one of the orientations that they give to the disciples at the time of death is to imagine that you are on the bottom of a pit, and then you look up and you see Jetsun Kappa's orange hat. So that means that he came to get you, and take you to a pure land. So we never forget that. But then there are other hats and other colors, and we can choose. Now, next we have here the Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, who is the head of the Gelugpas, and of course we all identify here our precious teacher, Olivia Hansen. And our thanks, Olivia, for all you have done for us. All right, next, okay, this is the 17th Karmapa is the title of the reincarnating head of the Karma Karju lineage. The first was Dusun Khyentse in the 12th century, succeeded by 16 further incarnations. The Karmapa's main role is to ensure that the transmission of the tantric teachings is passed down intact through the generations. A key element of the installation of a new Karmapa is the use of a black hat. So the Karmapas are a very interesting group of people. And this black hat is said to be woven from the hair of a Dakini. Dakini means a deity. Okay, the conceptual framework of the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so we take a look now at what it consists of. We have four noble truths, the word noble meaning absolute truth, something that along the 2,000 years or something, nobody was able to really contest the noble truth as discovered by Buddha Shakyamuni. The first is the truth of suffering, which means suffering exists. Then the truth of origin. We have to find out how did the suffering originated. The truth of its cessation, and the truth of the path leading to cessation. And in the fourth noble truth, we have the Noble Eightfold Path, which are the basic steps that we have to follow. Of course, this sutra, due to its complexity, it can be understood according to three levels of understanding. First, through learning and studying. Secondly, as a result of deep meditation or contemplation. And third, acquired through direct experience. The first level, through learning and studying, what happens? We deepen our knowledge of the object and reflect on its meaning, seeking to understand the subject, until we attain a certain comprehension which brings a certainty, conviction, or logic, in such a way that it satisfies our curiosity, search, or research. The second level is a result of deep contemplation. This level is still coordinated by the intellect. However, we seek to understand it deeply, going into meditation. Further, we go into constant contemplation until we gain some familiarity with the truth concerning the object of our investigation. The third level is acquired through direct experience. Eventually, we may reach a point where the object comes to fruition. We interact with our emotional and or higher vehicles. Conviction may no longer arise from our mental efforts. Intellectual investigation may be totally absent. Thus, the direct experiences occur naturally, bringing great joy or ecstasy. The Dalai Lama says in his book, Light in the Way, which we can find at the bookstore here. It's an introductory level book that was written for Westerners. He says, if you become interested in the topic of the Four Noble Truths, you will then need to build upon the first level of understanding and constantly familiarize yourself through deep reflection. So, in a sense, you have to do your homework. You can then reach the second level of understanding. Okay, so he's explaining to us how we have to work step by step through all those three levels. Then you need to deepen your understanding still further by engaging in regular meditation so that you can progress to the third level of understanding. You need to appreciate, however, that this process will take time. It requires commitment to a long and sustained period of spiritual practice. So you need to overcome the modern-day habit of automation. We need to strive to overcome this conditioning and go back through more than 2,000 years of human endeavor to a time when hard work was the only viable method. Okay, now we talk about Buddhism and other ancient traditions. When Buddha was born, there were many other spiritual and philosophical systems of thought. He integrated into his own teachings some important practices, such as cultivation of simple pointedness of mind to develop calm abiding, meditative practice to reduce attachment, but mainly he developed a system of thought and practice unique at the time, which considered the key insight, which is, there is no independently existing or real self. This became known as a teaching about the non-self or anatma. There were two main spiritual traditions in ancient India. One believed in a transcendent God or being the divine creator, and the other one did not hold this concept of a transcendent God. Some accepted the idea of rebirth or reincarnation, others did not. Those who accepted reincarnation believed in the possibility of attaining liberation from cyclic existence, called samsara, and eventually finding the ultimate spiritual freedom. Some accepted the notion of an eternal, abiding self, Atman, while others rejected it. In summary, the Dalai Lama states, Buddhism belongs to the category of those ancient Indian schools that reject any notion of a transcendent God as the creator. This is a classical Buddhism way of looking at things. There are exceptions, however, such as the practice of the Green Tara, the mother of conquerors, as an independent and real being, who has a power on the destiny of the practitioner, and who can then take her as refuge. And of course, the tantric deities are also created, and they finally become like real beings in our lives. For the metaphysical people, this concept of transcendent being is simply unacceptable. They question, where does he come from? Or how can we establish his true beginning? One ancient Indian philosophy, the Sankhya, agrees with Buddhist thoughts that all beings, things, and events come into existence as results of causes and conditions. So let's take a quick look on dependent origination and the law of causality. This is a key and fundamental principle in Buddhism. It states that everything arises and ceases in dependence upon causes and conditions. So this is very basic when we study the Four Noble Truths. You know, the second Noble Truth has to do, look into the origin. So we have to study the law of causality. The noble scholar Asanga identified three key conditions which govern this principle. First is the absence of designer condition due to the non-existence of a transcendent intelligence behind the origin of the universe. In second place, the condition of impermanence, which we all know. There are various causes and conditions which give rise to this process, all being impermanent and subject to change themselves. Then the condition of potentiality. It states that something cannot be produced from just anything without having a set of causes and conditions which lead to a series of effects and consequences, and also due to some natural relationship between them. The Dalai Lama comments, we must be able to trace the causation of physical properties back to other levels of these properties, and eventually to the beginning of the present universe. Through this reductive process, we can envision a kind of state at the beginning of the present universe where there was a cause for the evolution of the entire macroscopic world. In one of the texts of the Kalachakra Tantra, there is an understanding of what are the so-called space particles. These are thought to be extremely subtle material particles, which are seen as a source of or origin of the entire evolution of the physical universe that we experience now. So, in terms of causation, we can trace all material objects back to their constituted particle level, and from there back to the origin of the universe. Now, when we look into the inner world of consciousness, this mental world is extremely diverse. And Dalai Lama says to think about consciousness or mind as a single entity is misleading. If we consider each moment of cognition or mental experience, we will realize that each is related to either internal or external objects. Then we often form false impressions based on distorted perceptions, illusory or false views, in such a way that we cannot really state which perception is valid and which is not. Within the realm of consciousness, we can identify two categories. Those related to our sensory experiences, relationship with objects is directed and unmediated. Then we have those which interact with our cognitive faculties, mediated through language, concepts, thoughts, or images. And the Dalai Lama explains the difference. In the first case, perception is primarily understood as a direct experience of objects at a sensory level. This occurs through the mediation of sense data, but involves no judgment about whether the object is desirable or undesirable, attractive or unattractive, good or bad. These judgments occur at the second stage when conceptual thought comes into play. Why is this so important? Again, the Dalai Lama answers. If it were simply the case that these distorted or false perceptions had no negative consequences, this would be fine. But it's not so. Our distorted way of understanding the world leads to all kinds of problems by creating confusion in our minds. This confusion influences the way in which we engage with the world, which in turn causes suffering both for ourselves and for others. Since we naturally wish to be happy and to overcome suffering, it is vital to recognize that a fundamental confusion in our understanding of the world, including about our own selves, lies at the root of much of our suffering and difficulties. Furthermore, since our experiences of happiness and suffering and the fundamental ignorance that lies at the root of our suffering are all mental phenomena, we genuinely wish to pursue the fulfillment of our natural aspiration, which is to attain happiness and overcome suffering. Then we must look at the four principles of reality. Now that we understand that our experiences and things that occur in the physical, emotional, mental, or higher states of consciousness come in existence independent upon cause and conditions, we may ask, what is the meaning, or how does this impact our real daily experiences, such as the moments of pain, pleasure, suffering, and happiness? And then the question, are our desires natural? The Venerable Precious Teacher explains, since experiences are mental phenomena, it becomes crucial for those who genuinely wish to attain happiness and overcome suffering to understand at least the basic workings of their own internal world. Our experiences of happiness and suffering do not occur for no reason at all. They arise as a result of preceding causes and conditions and the coming together of many different factors. Some of these factors are external, but by far the majority are internal, that is, related to our internal world. Other questions then arise. What exactly is the nature of these mental phenomena? How can we understand the law of causality in relation to our internal world? On what grounds can we accept that material objects possess certain defining characteristics, such as being visible, tangible, and so on? And on what grounds can we understand that mental phenomena also possess defining characteristics, such as being free of obstructive spatial properties and having the nature of subjective experience? Why is there a continuum of consciousness at all? And why, for that matter, is there a continuum of the material world? Then he summed up the four principles of reality. First, the principle of nature, which states, we exist and possess a natural desire to be happy and to overcome suffering. Now, is this a purely natural process with no extraneous influences operating? Okay, and so when we start studying this principle of realities, we end up having to study karma. Karma comes into the picture. The term karma literally means action and refers to the process of cause and effect, where the intention of an agent or being is involved. So here, karma means an intentional act committed by a being who possesses a sentient nature, like a bee, and who is also capable of having a sentient experience while it's producing the nectar with a flower, the honey. And also, this is transferred, this experience is interdependent. This is with a child or someone who's experiencing the honey. Now, for Buddhists, there we are. The concept of karma provides a very useful framework for understanding how a non-sentient object, in this case a flower, can directly relate to a sentient being's experience. Can arise a feeling of friendship, of love, or love. Then the second principle is the principle of dependence, principle of reality, what I'm talking about, understanding the cause and effect. After a lot of meditation, we perceive the operation of this principle of dependence in the interaction that we have with things and events, giving rise to the emergence of further things and events. This is called interdependence, and here we have an example of the patient exchanging energies with a doctor. The third principle is called principle of function, understanding of how different things have different functions, such as particles, atoms, and other material substances, as well as phenomena. They all have their own individual properties, which cause them to function in their own particular way. And finally, the principle of valid reason. Given this, that will occur. And given that, this will occur. This precious teacher here, we all know him. He is very categorical. This is that. Okay, so with these four fundamental principles of reality, we attempt to arrive at a clear understanding of the workings of cause, conditions, and their effects, says the Dalai Lama. Now we are ready to enter then the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth, known as dukkha, is a truth related to suffering itself. We have to develop a profound recognition of the nature of suffering, and there are three levels of suffering, The suffering the suffering of change, and the pervasive suffering of conditioned existence. Again, the word noble meaning absolute. All right, then this is the first noble truth, the truth of suffering. Suffering of change, the suffering of conditioned existence. The second noble truth, I'll read. It's called samudaya. It's a recognition of the origins of suffering. The suffering of change, for example, when we recognize what is undesirable or desirable and wish to gain freedom from it through discernment, such as this truth that ego does not have an inherent existence. It's Maya. We must study, meditate about reality and its levels, again, before we really go deep into the Four Noble Truths. And then there are two origins of suffering. So here we're talking about the second truth, samudaya. One is related to the principle of karma. We have to understand the importance of karma, the law of causation, cause and effect, and the arising of favorable conditions leading to suffering. These, in the second topic, is afflictions. These are of two types: conceptual afflictions, which are mistaken views, delusions, arisen from three basic poisons of mind, which you know: ignorance, attachment, and hatred, and the emotional afflictions, which is lust, anger, and envy. Because they arise in our heart and mind and immediately create a state of deep disturbance and unrest, and also due to our craving or desires for pleasurable sensations and experience, this leads to further level of afflictions in our mind and heart, such as sorrow, confusion, and other forms of suffering. Now, we have the aspect of ignorance and delusion, which is a foundation of the other two in all of our afflictions. It also refers to a mistaken notion of grasping at the existence of things and events as being real. Like when we think the sun moves around the earth, that is a delusion. So we must eradicate delusion. This lies at the root of all afflictions. We may strive to bring about an end to suffering and thereby attain the true liberation or moksha. The first vow that the Buddhist makes is the Pratimosha vow, which means, or it goes like this: I do not want to suffer anymore. You know, when we say that's enough, we had enough of this. This is actually a Buddhist vow. Okay, then we get to the third noble truth. It's called Nirodha, cessation of suffering. In that stage, we must recognize the possibility that suffering can and will end. It's realized through actively working towards understanding of suffering and the possibility of healing. This cessation of pain is due to understanding how everything is impermanent and can come to an end. And the fourth noble truth, it entails also the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a recognition of pervasive conditioning. We must cultivate an understanding that the suffering of pervasive conditioning not only acts as a basis for our present experience of suffering, but also serves as a source of future experiences of suffering. Then cultivate the genuine desire to seek freedom. Feel as if this conditioned experience or existence is an acute illness. This is a very strong statement. This is from the Dalai Lama. Feel that our conditioned existence is an acute illness from which we eagerly wish to recover as quickly as possible. And in order to dissolve this pervasive conditioning, we must work on the path that leads to freedom and suffering. And then that's when we enter the Noble Eightfold Path. The first is right view. If we have the right view of impermanence, of Maya, that there's no self, actually, then we already can, consider a lot of junk, a lot of things that we study or a lot of activities that we do. Then the second thing is right resolve, right resolution. What we do after we have this vision. What way to go, which path to actually take, or how to go deep into this path. The speech has to be compatible with the right view. And also your action has to be very objective and towards your aim, your goal, which in our case is to help humanity and work towards the reappearance of Christ. You have to develop the right livelihood, which means working, with honest means and with ethics and human rights relations. The right efforts, you have to develop the right effort through concentration, and again, according to your own means, in balance with your other priorities. Right mindedness, which is related to the right memory, what you really have to stick to, not be too distracted. This is so important. And then the right meditation. Where am I going to? What I'm doing here? And after we get all these 8 in that sequence, and of course, like it was mentioned here by Michael in the first speech, there are several variations to this, and several translations and several interpretations. So here we end the Four Noble Truths. Now, as you go out, you will receive a copy of the original truth in the Pali canon, which supposedly, according to some academics, are the most truthful to what the original speech by Buddha was. Namaste. Om Shanti.
Thank you very, very much, Tania.